let's look at how the U.S. economy is faring, because report says that business is cooled in the U.S. and inflation measures were mixed in April. So let's look at what's happening over there as we have Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze, who is Director, Research Policy and Development, African Development Studies Center, and also the VP of the ILE 104.9 FM, and our in-house analyst here. So you see his profile is very, very huge. So when he's talking about business in the U.S. economy, you know that is a round peg in a round hole. Good morning, sir.
Good Nigeria, Blessing. Good Nigeria, Femy.
Yeah, glad you have joined us.
Good Nigerians, Lagos.
Oh, yes. Do they understand?
Yeah.
They will understand in time, right? But the aim of SOUQ News is that economies are developed and that Nigeria is better for it, Africa is better for it. By extension, the world becomes better for it. You get the message now, right? So talking about the US, now in the month of April, business activities cooled down, signaling a 4-month low, which could be interpreted as the momentum of the US economy seems to be slowing down. What could be the reasons?
Well, a whole lot is happening globally. Don't forget that the US is one major driver of business globally, and internally a lot has not also been going right, and this, of course, because of the competition against Chinese low price products that are there globally. And so you're seeing an economy that is grappling with Joe working hard to see inflation go down, but the disposable income of an average American is not improving. Because it's always the simple equation of demand and supply reaction. So if demands are there, of course, you see the GDP rise and you see business activity booming. But if people don't have money to buy, so you expect a cool. And I think that is what it is. What the American needs to do is also to borrow a leaf from the Asian economy and see what the Asians are doing, to see how much money you can put in the hand of the buying public. And that, of course, will oil the wheel of the economy. But it's a tough time for Joe Biden, especially in an election year.
According to a report being released by the Commerce Department, looking at the annual growth rate for the first quarter, which is in the last 3 to 4 months, it has decelerated to 1.6%. Now, apart from that, you also observe that consumer spending is on the increase. You have hike in consumer spending and also the inflation rate. What will be the implication of this on the U.S. economy?
Yeah, spending can be high. Spending is high. The economy is doing well. Spending is still high. Inflation is stabilizing and going down. But the buying public don't have so much money to spend. This is a real issue. And that is what is going to grab, because that is what is affecting what company wear. When people are buying necessity and you are a luxurious economy, then what you see is that you will not be able to sustain those factories producing goods and services. And so all across board, you see that is happening. And it's not just only, you see major companies and players in the US, everybody is having this fair share. So it's not consumer having to buy more. No. If consumer is buying more, then of course we'll be talking about a growing economy, a robust economy. And that's why a lot of people are putting attention to say the average household spending, yes, it may look high because of the inflation. But when you look at volume, it's not as high. So that's affecting all major businesses across. You see what's happening with Tesla and the rest of it. So this is why you see the shuttle diplomacy of the commerce sector moving around to see how we can collaborate and ensure that you have a safer world where everybody's job is protected somehow, so that it won't be just one China that is dominating the sphere.
But also, report shows that inputs is becoming more expensive. Would that, at the end of the day, not increase inflation rate? If input becomes high, cost of raw materials are increasing, wouldn't that mean that the output will be sold more expensively, raising inflation rates?
Yeah, this is it. You are looking at, if you are buying energy, for example, the price is on the high. If you are buying raw material, the price is on the high. Now, but there's no corresponding increase in the buying power of the population. That's where the economy is facing the challenge. You have there's a CBN who is also thinking of raising rates.
The feds.
Yeah.
The Fed.
So you are raising your rates so that you want to move up money. Money from which hand? Because this is one thing that global economists must continue to look at. And I think the Oxford economist has advocated this, that we should not be measuring the wealth of nation by GDP, because GDP is in the hands of the few. It's not equally spread. So if you say the GDP of Nigeria, for example, is 450 billion US dollars, that money may, the greater part of that money, 90%, 80 to 90%, will be in the hands of less than 5% of Nigerians. So how do you use that to judge the vulnerable people who are the low runge of the pyramid, who don't have jobs or who are underemployed, and they don't have capacity to buy things in an economy that is rising? This is where monetary policy experts need to sit down and do a review of how to judge what inputs come into production. Take, for example, if you give an average man in Lagos today uh, 2 million to start a small business, what really can it buy? He can't even afford the rent. Not to talk about putting stock in it. Now, if he's taking that facility for 24%, now you have unemployment that's staring you in the face. So how will people be able to come to patronize him so that they will have more money to renew the rent the following year? So this is why you see companies are closing up. And this is global. So economists must understand that we cannot be relying on the 20th and the 19th century economic theory to explain the reality of today. So what we're going to look at is saying, how do we measure really what's the buying power of the public? Who actually has money? So when you are designing policy to reduce money in circulation, you also have to be conscious of who actually has that money and look for better ways of reducing that money rather than pass the burden on the consumer. Because if you do and the consumer don't have the buying power, you produce something, nobody takes it from you, then you're at a loss. So the risk become higher for everybody.
Now, the Fed for months now, the first quarter, and now you're moving to the second quarter, has decided in its wisdom to keep the benchmark interest rate, not to increase it, even though some have speculated that there's going to be an increase. Do you foresee an increase soon?
Yeah, because if we think that conventional economic way, the only way to look at it is to increase, which for me really won't make any economic sense in an economy that though you are having inflation rate going down, but the economy growth is on a cool.
All right. For an economy like the U.S. economy, where you have buffers and it's largely a credit economy, yet the buying power of the public is still reduced. What does that mean? In spite of all the cushion.
You see, if you follow the debate in the Congress and you see Joe Biden's attempt, even to write off, for example, student loan alone, it's huge. for the American people. You see, credit economy, if it's not properly managed, is actually an antidote for killing productivity. So somebody give you a credit card, you just spend money. That's all you do. And you are not producing. And your ability to be able to pay back had to be dependent on production. So this is the danger of a credit economy. So the government will need, from time to time, how to bail out the financial institutions. Who gives out this credit? So it's not as pleasurable as people want it to seem. If you have a credit economy and everybody is giving credit, you give them to a certain level of credit in their card, and then they can go out and sell. You are not stimulating productivity, really, because it makes some people to be very lazy. So for me, it's creating jobs that are high paying so that people have money and they can go to the market and buy what they want. So it's a high risk for the financial institution and the insurance companies, who, of course, are always considered to be best positioned to take the risk on behalf of the people and then, of course, the financial institution. So it's a huge risk for economy. Credit is not so. I don't see it as one way. Yeah, but then of course people can argue and say, okay, you put money in the hand of people, which means they can buy what companies are producing. The question is, you can buy, but can you pay back?
All right, let's make reference to the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State blinking to China on Wednesday with the motive to strengthen relations with China. Also, see the possibility of resolving some of the uh, imminent conflicts. Why do you think this kind of visit is significant? And how is it that China is occupying another sensitive position when it comes to being a trade partner to the U.S.?
Well, I think what you should understand is the dynamics of trade here. China seems to be producing very high quality products and at a very reduced rate. And American is sensing, and the entire West really sensing that China is overprotecting its industries and paying off the excess. And that's why uh, they are making other countries in the world not to be competitive. But I think it is also better for them to also understand what China had done in recent past. As the cost of living is increasing, workers put pressure on their employer to pay more. That's just normal. So inflation is going up, and of course that also will trigger the cost of living, and where of course you are not able to, your salary is not able to take you home. So what do? You start to negotiate with your employer, and then your employer increase salary for you. And as that salary is increased, of course, where will they take it from? They're going to take it from the profits. Now, what will happen is that you have to revalue the price of your products, which make it go higher. Now, China has substantially reduced that pressure of wage increase because they have deployed humanoids and robotics to do what human beings can do in the factory. And their factory are so agile that they can switch products. So what happened? There's excess demand. You just press the button. The machine is producing. If there's a glut, what do? You stop the button and sell off what you have. Whether inflation is increasing machine will not come and ask you for increase in salary. So you are able to stabilize what your price is. So you accusing China that, oh, there's a way you are subsidizing your industry, that's why they can produce this, may not be completely right. So what lesson do we all learn from here is how do we embrace technology to cut down the cost of production so that we can produce products that are affordable, and then the world can become competitive. Because nobody wants to see something that is cheap, which is good, and then we drop it and go and buy one that is luxurious, that even maybe less of quality. So don't forget that consumers are rational. They want to buy at something, of course, that is what is price in terms of value delivery. So if you have a rational consumer behavior where people will buy what is better for them and what is economical, you can't blame China for that. So you go to American market today, even the American people would prefer to buy the Chinese than the one that is produced here because this is cheaper and it can do the same work.
But US is very technologically advanced. Is there something wrong with this model China is using, or could there be some negative sides of it, if not now, in the future, which makes the US not want to go that route?
Well, they're all decisions that you will need to take. And don't also forget that there's also a very huge presence of America in China even. It's not as if China is all doing all this by itself. They also have companies who are there operating. But I think what's fundamental here is the cheapness of labor is what is the real determining factor in terms of cost of production. So if you have a high energy cost and you have high wage costs, and then some of these materials you also need to import from other places, and then put the value of logistics in it in terms of supply chain. So you find that the cost of production for you become very high.
All right. At the end of the day, would this lead to loss of job for people in China if they continue with the robot model? When you have robots doing the job, do you need so much humans?
No, what they've done is the fact that you understand this thing, they knew that this change was coming, and then move people from the conventional way of thinking about uh, skills acquisition and then channel it into the humanoid. Because there's a whole lot of servicing that is happening in that industry. It's a new industry. It's just like what happened when people used to do typewriter. And then all of a sudden, the computer came. Now, the computer didn't drive people away, except those who didn't want to change. Who felt that, this computer thing won't work. How can people forget? The skill was so much, and of course, they didn't embrace the computer technology. And what happened? New people embraced the technology, and those who refused to embrace were swept off the market. Maybe you see them now only in the high court typing affidavit. So that's where you see those technology relevant. So that's what happened in every industry. So as a new door is opening, it's opening a new vista of opportunity where people can actually get in and do things well. So even where we're sitting down here, AI is doing a whole lot of things that media people are doing. But that does not mean that AI is going to take away the work of anchors and things like this. But it's to say that there are a lot of human new skills or knowledge that is required to drive the AI process. And so if you don't change or adapt, then you become a victim. So that is what it is. So if you go to places like Japan today, for example, there's massive investment, almost going to about $2 billion that is voted to train people who are 40 years and above on the use of AI, for example, so that it can fit into the new job roles. And of course, if you listen to the budget presentation of Singapore 2024 budget, same also has been factored in. How do we help people in that age range who do not belong to the internet generation to be able to catch up with what internet is doing? So those are the things that has played out in China. So they have been able to shift people's attention from the conventional work to the new and emerging technology. And so that industry is also booming.
All right, let's look at the economic rivalry between the US and China, how that may likely have impact on the US manufacturing sector. You're aware of what happened with TikTok, the ban on TikTok and the suspicion of the link to China and all that. Of course, this will keep going on and on. And China is repositioning itself as an alternative when it comes to manufacturing. Now, what may likely be the impact of that on the US economy, especially the manufacturing sector?
Well, it's trade war. This trade war that's going on. So in every war, there'll always be casualties, and there's no doubt about that. So they say war is the continuation of foreign policy by other means. So whether it's economic war, it's military war, war is war. So what you see here is the fact that every economy is trying to protect itself. And don't forget, you're just talking about TikTok, because TikTok is a technology that these guys have also put in place to rival what is in the US. So look at it, Amazon is doing online trade. But China will sell by Amazon. So they have built their Alibaba platform, which is purely Chinese, to also counter what is here. So that's the struggle for supremacy between the US and China. And that, of course, that rivalry, it will be there until time ends. But what impact will it have on the US industry? Huge impact. And it is not just today, that has been on for a very long time. And except it for Donald Trump, who made a whole lot of effort to see how to revive the industries in the US. And that was why you saw that during Donald Trump, the emphasis was on American first. And that was all his foreign policy. Yes, yeah, we know that things are happening. How do we protect the American industry? How do we get our auto factories to get back to work? And I think that's what the Biden administration should continue, really, to see how do we create competitive edge for our company. I've always said it here. Philip Cotter says there are just three ways people compete. It's either you are competing on price, or you are competing on differentiation, or you create a blue ocean for yourself. So if you want to compete and you cannot produce something at a reduced price that people will be attracted to it, then create a product whose functionality is different from what is in the market or what other people are creating. So in that case, you're differentiated. You build different brand and say, yeah, we're not selling the same thing. So you are selling your thing, I'm selling my thing. And you see that between Apple and Samsung. Even when the technology of Apple is more Samsung, but the value of Apple in the market is higher than Samsung. So why? Because Apple is not competing on price. It has positioned itself and differentiated itself completely from Samsung.
Looking at the slowdown in business activities, that seemed like progress in the fight to bring down inflation. But on the other hand, the rise in cost of inputs seem like what would take the economy back to what the position it was in before. Does that create a sort of dilemma for businesses if the rise of inputs, if inputs is rising, but the purchasing power of the consumers is reducing? At the end of the day, where does this leave businesses in the US?
Yeah, we've all been moving around that circle for a while since this conversation about those developments started. The point I'm making is uh, when you're struggling to control inflation, your monetary policy will tend to increase the cost of inputs, and that of course drive prices high. Now, as prices are going high, if there's no corresponding increase in the earning power of the consumer, so their buying ability reduces. So, which means even if you are producing, you won't have people off takers. So, which increases the risk for the company.
So the question is this: would the businesses be needing bailout from the government to avoid close down?
Yeah, but the question is how many of bailout can government really do? And that's the point I'm making, that what is possible is a fair to say how to think outside of the box to increase productivity within the society so that you can have citizens or society with good disposable income and they are able to go back to always buy. So that balance is what the role of every government is in a state. The fiscal and the monetary policy of the state to see how to manage it such that you don't put the industry at risk, which of course eventually will bring the entire nation into a sort of fragility. Now, if you are not doing that balancing act very well, you create a lot of poverty in this. What happened? The industry will fold up, and that increases more poverty. So your bailout, who are you bailing out? Now put money in the hand of the company to produce for people who cannot buy, or you put money in the hand of those who can buy so that the company can continue to prosper. So that symbiotic relationship between the producer and the consumer had to be moderated very well. So bailouts is throwing money at a problem, hardly may not solve it.
All right. As a follow up to that, according to a report being released by the Commerce Department, the GDP for the first quarter of the year also decelerated, which is from January to March. And if you look at the G, that talks about the economic output for that quarter. Taking a clue from what China is doing, what can the US do differently as they're moving to a new quarter to see that they improve the economic output for the next quarter?
What's your GDP? It's the sum total of
Goods and
goods and services that is produced in a particular country in a particular year. That's your GDP. So that's the point we are looking at. If your company produces and nobody's buying, have it? So the rate of producing more will not be there. In other words, you see supply outnumbering demand. So that can't grow your GDP. That can only reduce your GDP. What's China doing? China is seeing how to sustain that GDP in their country. So they're looking for market everywhere globally with low price. That's the only way. So if you bring American product to Nigeria and you bring a Chinese product to Nigeria, people will go for the one that they can afford. So that is what it is. And that will be in favor of the Chinese. What can they do? Is to see how to reduce the price of inputs. so that they can have competitive price in the market, and the gap between what they are selling and what the competitors are selling is not too wide. Don't forget, consumer are rational buyers.
All right, since we're talking about GDP, let's look at what's going on in South Korea, where the GDP for the first quarter from January to March actually surpassed estimates. But economists are unsure about the outlook for the rest of the year. Why do you think that is?
Well, you see a lot of expansion activities that's happening in South Korea at the moment, trying to see how to show up their production base and productivity and growth in the industry. That is what is happening. But don't also forget that after Taiwan, South Korea is also playing majorly in the semiconductor business, which is actually the driver of the world today. Because if you, as we are sitting down here, almost all the things in our bodies and our is all semiconductor. And as this technology keep evolving, that market will keep expanding. So if you are not in the conventional business environment, chances are that you are going to be able to grow and sustain whatever growth that it is. For 5 months, you have seen a nation who has consistently grow. How sustaining it is that if that model run, except that there's a change in dynamics of global politics or geopolitics, that's where you now see that something will drop. And as people continue to place demand on semiconductor and its accessories, of course, the Korean economy will continue to grow, and it's possible that they are able to sustain it. And that, of course, is depending on how they are able to also leverage the relationship they have with the West.
All right, let's talk about sustainers now, because some economists have also raised concern about the sustainers. Of course, they've been able to maintain the space for the past 2 years. For South Korea to be able to sustain this kind of momentum, what critical steps would be needed, especially in the area where they have the comparative advantage to sustain this momentum?
Well, I am always very wary about some of all these forecasts. And it's also important that we must also know where forecasts are coming from. Because, like I said in the paper review section this morning, don't forget that in every war, propaganda is key and huge. So that's prediction. People are making prediction, and I don't think they are prophetic. So if it's just simple prediction, you don't know what they have done to be able to sustain this growth in the 5 months. So you cannot sit down in your office and be calculating how they are going to go down. And I think they also have people who are also thinking. And that is how they have been able to move in this growth trajectory. And they're also not unaware of the geopolitics that is ongoing between China and the America. So as long as that continue and they are producing, they of course have the Western market to themselves. So playing well in that geopolitics is what is it that will sustain South Korea. And you know, like the South Korean government, you don't see them active in global politics. So the focus is on business and trade, and that's what they do. So they are not as active in uh, the conflict that is all in the world, and so that shield them. So you know your allies, you know your friend, and the country has known relative peace and progress for a very long time. And I think that is enough intelligence that's been deployed to run their economy. So if they are not offsetting those balances and those relationships, I think the growth is sustainable.
All right, the boost in the GDP of South Korea, according to the Bank of Korea, was made possible by construction and the increased private spending. So construction accounted for about 2.1% increase when it comes to the previous quarter. Now, you've talked about the likelihood of sustenance of this momentum that the economy is having. Now, what should happen to sustain it? There's already increase in private spending, and in construction is ongoing, as well as export is increasing. But what more should the South Korean government do to sustain this growth, even though it projected a slightly less growth for itself than what IMF projected for it?
Yeah, I think every economy in the world that you see that is prospering, you cannot take construction away. Because the more construction you do, the more people you put at work. And the more people that are working, the more people that are earning. The more people that are earning, the more disposable income you have, and then the ability to purchase what is produced. So that constant drift is always there to see how we can create a new thing. So I was thinking yesterday, and somebody was saying, "Oh, just imagine the flood that came into UAE, for example, and then of course UAE voting about 80 billion dirham to manage waste." When you say you are managing waste, that's construction. You can see that volume of money that is getting into the economy. And if that volume of money gets into that economy, it will spur a lot of activities. And as these activities are happening, people are having more money in their hands, and then they are able to do business. And I think that's the job of nations to sit down, how we can sustain productivity, that the individuals are productive, private businesses are thriving, opportunities are opened up, and then, of course, that productivity is what is required. As long as countries are not productive, then, of course, you find industry will not be able to compete. And that's why I have always advocated there's no government anywhere in the world who want to be pro-people and anti-business and prosper. The only true way to actually be pro-people is to be pro-business. And I think that's one lesson that the US need to learn. That you cannot be pro-people and anti-business and expect your economy to be robust. So that balance is there for South Korea, that they're not just pro-people, they are pro-business. And as businesses are making it, then the people will be making it. Because government cannot be feeding everybody because it doesn't have the means.
All right, if you look at the South Korean economy, it's the fourth largest in the Asia region, and also if you look at the GDP estimated for about the 1.7 trillion US dollars. Now, there are those who argue that somehow GDP does not connote the strength of the economy; it's just the size. What do you make of this in respect to South Korea?
You need to travel to South Korea to be able to understand that they have huge strength. It's not just GDP growth. The economy is robust. Even militarily, the South Korean is becoming more stronger within the region. Uh, the 1 trillion is not a child's play. We are struggling to say we want to grow a $1 trillion economy, even with the natural endowment that God has given to us here in Nigeria. And you are seeing a small country with 1.7 trillion. It is not strong. What makes people strong is the volume of resource that is in your hand. As long as you have it and you are able to put a whole lot of things in place, then your strength is guaranteed. And that is why, of course, you see their principal ally to the Americans, especially in the Asian region. So that shows you how much they are valued in terms of their contribution to global economy. So they are a voice that you cannot downplay.
In spite of being robust, the South Korean economy struggles with high borrowing costs and inflation. What's the likelihood of these two factors impeding its growth?
Yeah, but it's the ability to moderate it for me. That is what it is. So if you have a high borrowing cost, uh, and then of course people must look for alternative to the borrowing cost, and of course with a high borrowing cost, of course that of course will trigger inflation. Managing inflation is a big challenge. But again, the Asian economy have also shown some resistance, and I think what we may be even calling the high borrowing cost may not be as dangerous as the kind that is playing out in Africa.
All right, we'll wrap it up here today, and we'll continue another time looking at South Korea and how they're doing. Maybe by the end of second quarter, let's see what the GDP would be, and that will at least tell if the progress can be sustained throughout the year. Thank you so much.
I'm quite optimistic that they are able to sustain that growth, especially the particular place where they are playing in the semiconductor market. That trajectory will continue, except there's a geopolitical destabilization. I expect that they continue to grow.
All right. Thank you very much, Idahosa Osamhanze, for being with us on the show today. And happens to be the grand finale for the week. So I see already that you're set for a good weekend, one where fitness looks like it's among top priority.
Wellness is the talk.
I can follow you to the gym.
That would be appreciated.
Like an executive PA.
No, so I need some gym myself too. I need to be fit. All right, thank you so much for being with us all through the week. We value your time with us on the show, so we ask for it again Monday, 8 a.m. West African time for another edition of Early Exchange. The Isle 104.9 is here with Business Midbits, and you could keep spreading the good news to others who have not enjoyed the goodness from Early Exchange and every other program on SOUQ News. Let them know SOUQ is where business, economy, and development is brewing. And of course, you can be a part of it. Take your share from every program. I'm Blessing Aichi. Be good. Enjoy your weekend.
Well, that's our offering for today, but don't forget the conversation continues on our social media platform as Early Exchange will return on Monday. Don't forget, and you need to enjoy your weekend because you take responsibility for everything you do. So be responsible with your enjoyment and ensure that you have the best of the weekend. I am Femy Ayodele. Bye for now.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.